This is the man that makes Sanctuary great. This is Andrew Lockington. He's the composer.
Look at this, wow.
Yeah, amazing. He's the man who actually helps the words have impact.
And this is my guitar player.
Yeah, I'm the guitar player.
As a musician and a music lover, I think music in film and television is incredibly important. It helps inform the mood of the scene. It helps drive a scene.
The music will bring up the tempo of the show, will bring up the pacing, will bring up the stakes and the crisis, and that the music completely helps that journey.
The music in Sanctuary does that exceptionally well. I think the music really helps set the tone for the show. The show has a very particular look and a very particular feel, and the music is a huge, huge component in that vibe, in the look and the feel of the show.
The show kind of changed scope and scale, and it got bigger and cooler, and started doing tiling moves and interesting visual kind of add-ons, and we really needed to find a new sound for the show to signify the new look of the show. And Andrew was sort of our only choice.
Because these guys love music, and they really use it to help tell the story of their show. So I feel like they give me a lot of responsibility and a lot of playroom to try new things. And when I float ideas, they bounce ideas back to me that are even better, and then it just gets us going in a creative room.
Our music is very different these last 2 seasons because Andrew brings this he's got a very worldly feel to his music. It's not, and it doesn't sound sci-fi, which is interesting. Although it works completely in the realm of what we're doing.
Well, the overall approach we determined early on when I was hired. We were looking for a general sound of what is the musical sound of Sanctuary. And what we ended up with is really a mishmash of all these different kinds of music, but a recipe for that. So we have a certain percent of it is Middle Eastern or Melanesian influence. Certain percent of it is medieval, like hurdy-gurdy type instruments, old European instruments, and a certain amount of it is technologically influenced, like old sounds put through modern filters or interesting 8-bit processors, sounds that kind of pull it out of the ancient and give it a sense of a modern element, a modern sound.
He's brought in drums, he's brought in a lot of voices, he's brought in instruments that we've never used before.
I love the sound of vocals in the show, and I love using vocals as an instrument as opposed to as a narrative, as a giving English language song. What I'm really trying to do is use the voice as a sound and as a melody, and really not have the audience grab onto what they're saying. So one of the techniques, the first, I've used maybe 5 or 6 different vocalists. And the first one I used is a girl I've used many times, Emily Claire Barlow, who is a great singer out of Toronto. And she came in and we started playing around with Latin and trying to come up with phrases that translated into Latin. And then, even in some cases, mispronounced on purpose. Really help give this sense of a musical element without distracting the audience away from the dialogue and what's going on in the show. And from there, I played around with, some Farsi, some Syrian vocals, a lot of Middle Eastern vocals, just because they aren't constricted to the scales that we are. Like in Western music, we have a 12-tone scale, and there's a lot of quarter-tone music all over the world, and I really like that element of something. There's a melody that I understand, and when it gets to a certain point, kind of twists in a way that I've never heard before. And I love using that element in the show. What I do is early on in the season, I will write some themes, some general ideas once I've seen picture. One of the big advantages of working on Sanctuary is because there's so much blue screen and green screen, so much effects, there's a big amount of time between when I get locked picture and when I actually have to deliver. So whereas on other shows you might have 10 days to deliver an episode, on Sanctuary, it might be 2 or 3 months. So it allows me to do a lot of lead time and go in and do sessions with, I have a core group of musicians that I work with that kind of comprise the sound of the Sanctuary score.
You just throw suggestions out like, it would be neat if there was something a very annoying tone happening here to keep the audience on edge. And then Andrew go, well, there's a Chinese violin track that I recently recorded that if I pitch it this way, I think will give you the effect. And you just love this process. It's like that's where the real art of it all comes in.
The coolest thing about working on this show is I'll come up with off-the-wall ideas that most producers would veto immediately and say, hey, you know, that's too outside the box. And these guys are exactly the opposite.
It was a piece where I said, okay, and maybe use a harmonica in here and zither, and because I don't know the instruments that he uses, so I just throw this stuff out, and maybe it's a jaw harp, and he goes, oh, okay. And I went, no, I'm just kidding. He goes, well, and I said, how about this place we use a hurdy-gurdy? No. Okay. And he goes, I do. And I went, are you kidding? He goes, no, I have an ancient hurdy-gurdy that I use that does this. It's crazy. I went, you're kidding. He says, no, half the sounds you hear come off of something like that. He uses all these bizarre instruments to do stuff, and it's where the very unique sound of this is, and we're unbelievably blessed to have this man at the helm who is crazier than we are when it comes to what Sanctuary should sound like. I can dance!
This is interesting. I don't know if you remember, this is the very first thing I wrote for you guys.
Yes.
Yes, I had
Never
done
heard
nothing.
anything.
You'd
Yeah.
never heard anything. And I get this call saying, hey, can you write a piece of Bollywood music for Will to dance to? That is kind of Bollywood, but also,
That states it was going to be score as well.
yeah, it had to kind of be both. And in fact, I think in the end it was used.
Well, I had always wanted to be an intercut, the music you could intercut her in the helicopter and him dancing, and so we'd begin with the dance, and then it would go to, and we'd keep the whole, pull the whole story in. It was like, yeah, just go do that. Could you just do that? You know? And he did.
It was really fun. It was really fun. And in fact, I don't know if you remember, I got a lot of good feedback from the choreographer, because she was telling me the elements of the piece that I guess they had danced to in practicing for this scene that they had really responded to. So, and main things she said were bongo drums, dole, and those are the elements that I kind of built from. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. Breach is an episode where we have Amanda's character is all alone in this abandoned building. And there's such a sense of unknown and discomfort. She doesn't know who this is attacking her. And we don't, I mean, this guy looks very primitive, and yet he has this spectacular technology that is way ahead of our time. So it was trying to come up with a way that the music could be tribal and reflect the image of what he is and the unknown, and also come up with an element that reflects the technology. And what I tried to do is actually approach it completely in contrast. So when we see him, and visually we're seeing something very old and his garb, etc., I tried to be a little more modern with the music. And then when we have the shots of this amazing power generators on the ceiling, I tried to, harken back to something older and really try to play the contrast of the elements.
Adam, what have you done?
I'm working on episode 8 right now, and we have this flashback back to when they all met and in old England. And I've taken all of these sounds that I've been using for the last 2 seasons, and I've started pulling back all of the techno elements that I used to manipulate them, so it's the raw sound that no one's ever heard before. But it makes sense that, we haven't moved into the future. This is when we began. This is the core time of the 5. So now the music is, paralleling that and stripping back to a very simple element and the very simple theme. So many of the episodes, the orchestral element is a small part of it. So I've worked with, I have really great sound libraries of orchestral sounds. For Normandy, it's going to be such an epic episode, and it will be very orchestrally based. So we came up with the idea of actually recording an orchestra, making this a really unique approach, and hiring live musicians, which is rare in this day and age for television. But I think it's really necessary to have the real instruments because they're so exposed and such an important character in this episode to live up to the bar that's been set with the show. The show is so filmic. Like each episode feels like a film, and they'd set the bar so high. It felt like that was a resource I really had to draw upon. And also it really helps kind of convey the emotions, and an orchestra is one of those elements that you don't need to justify for Western art form. Everyone goes to see a movie, they'll, whether it's set in Arabia or Indonesia or wherever, if they hear a Western orchestra playing, they accept it. We grow up realizing that's a part of our art form. So there's a comfort level there that the audience can feel when they hear strings and brass and an orchestra sound. So I've tried to incorporate that in for the moments where I don't want to alienate. I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. I want the audience to feel like we're holding their hand and they can relate to the characters.
Because the rest of the show was all Andrew Lockington's, we thought, let's give Andrew Lockington a chance to do this.
We changed the opening theme as to honor Andrew, really, and to say, you're our guy, you're doing all the music, change our theme.
So when we talked about redoing the opening titles for season 3, we basically looked at what the fans had responded to in the score in season 2. And everyone really liked the vocal element. So we knew that had to be an element. We also really wanted to add real momentum to the opening titles. A lot of times in the show, we're building to the opening titles, and we wanted to feel like the opening titles were going even bigger. And then lastly, I really wanted something that if someone was grabbing a drink in the fridge and the TV was on in the other room, they would hear that and know within 3 seconds, oh, that's Sanctuary. Something very distinctive that didn't sound like anything else. So I tried to pull everything in. I tried to pull in the orchestral element, the hurdy-gurdy, the electric violin, the mbira. They're all a part of it. And one element that I just started playing around with in season 3, but I hadn't played around with in season 2, was electric guitar. And in talking to Damien and knowing that Damien was a great electric guitar player, we figured out a way for him to play on the score and play on the opening titles. So that awesome electric guitar on the opening titles is our executive producer, creator, director, Damien Kindler.
It's one of those dreams that we all have where he approached me and said, I think you should play guitar in the theme. It's very simple. I can show you the parts and you can play with it. And I was like, oh, I'd love to. That'd be great. Thinking it would go away because I'd have to go to Toronto to record it. And I knew I couldn't get there. But then he tricked me. He said, so you're going to play on the theme. I was like, but Andrew, I can't get to Toronto. I'm sorry. I guess we'll have to give it a miss. He said, no, I'm coming to Vancouver. I brought my portable recording device. It goes into my laptop. Just bring your guitar to work. We'll plug it in. So we recorded it literally in my office in the studio. I was very nervous. I don't know how people record, like their session musicians record for a living. It's very nerve-wracking. I was very flattered. It's cool trivia. And when we finished recording, I'm like, look, you don't have to use any of this. Just throw it all away. And he said, no, I found what I want it to be. And it went in. So, I mean, look, honestly, I'm thrilled. Are you kidding? Playing on the theme of a TV show? That's like huge. That's wow. But I didn't say, I shall do it and you shall let me. It was more like he said, no, you're a music geek. Do it. Come on, let's do it. And I was like, okay.
Literally, and this is without word of a lie, every time Amanda hears the theme music, she dances.
And every time our show starts and we have the long, 30-second title sequence, I dance. I love it.
The most fun part of working on this show is I have this amazing freedom to explore all of these different types of music. There's no boundaries. They've never said, hey, you can't go there, that's too weird. They always encourage me to think outside the box and think of a different approach.
He's always pushing the envelope, trying new things, giving the show a distinctive deep sound that sounds like a feature.
I can't say enough about him. And the most unassuming, sweet man. And then this orchestra comes out of him.
The music that we hear, whenever we sit down and do a mix, which is when we actually hear all the music mixed with the sound and all the sound effects and all the people at Sharp Sound do this incredible job. And it's a surprise. It's a gift to us every Tuesday when we go in and sit down. And you sit there and you watch this thing on a giant screen in 5.1 surround sound. And you hear Andrew's music mixed with the sound effects and this kind of stuff. At the end of every one of them, and we've finished, half the season right now. By the time we're doing this, we'll have finished all of them. Every time, without exception, we just go, Andrew Lockington is a genius.
The music that we have is unlike any other music on any other show. There's nothing generic about the music in Sanctuary. It's very particular, and it's definitely that's the Sanctuary sound, I guess you'd call it.
Just to have the freedom to explore all these different avenues, I think it really frees my hands to do things that I've never done before. And as a composer, I think kind of having the training wheels off and having to go out and learn how to ride that two-wheeler for the first time, you come up with creative ways of solving problems that you wouldn't in a normal situation.